I saw the life I threw away picking out vanilla ice cream. He didn't see me. He hasn't in years. Daniel Peterson was there with his wife Becky and their 3 kids at the Kroger on Riverside Drive in Columbus, the one with the good produce section where my mom always shopped. His twin boys were arguing over flavors, chocolate chip versus cookies and cream, their voices carrying across the frozen foods section. His daughter, maybe 14 or so, was laughing at something he said about how vanilla was the superior choice because you could add anything to it. "Dad, you're so boring," she said, but with affection, bumping his shoulder with hers. "Boring is underrated," he replied. And Becky laughed, this genuine, comfortable laugh that made my chest tighten. My fingers were turning white where they gripped the cart handle. I could feel the metal pattern pressing into my palms, leaving marks that would last longer than I wanted them to. Becky's hand rested on his back, just below his shoulder blade, that casual touch that comes from years of being comfortable with someone. They looked like one of those catalog families I used to mock for being boring when I thought adventure meant everything. The twins finally agreed on cookies and cream. Daniel reached for the vanilla anyway, winking at his daughter, who rolled her eyes but smiled. That's when I ducked behind the cereal aisle, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone in the store could hear it. I pressed my back against the shelves, boxes of Cheerios and Lucky Charms framing my escape, and I could still hear Becky's laugh trailing me down the aisle. At our 20th reunion, he looked through me like a stranger, which I guess I am now. Standing there in that grocery store, hiding behind boxes of cereal like a coward, listening to their normal, happy family sounds fade as they moved toward checkout, I thought he'd wait while I grew up. That was always the plan in my head, even if I never said it out loud. Daniel was supposed to be there when I was done figuring myself out, when I was done being young and stupid and wild. He was supposed to understand that I needed time. He was supposed to wait. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, back when I was 18 and thought I had all the time in the world. I met Daniel in late 2004 through my friend Chris. It was October, I remember, because the leaves were just starting to turn, and Chris brought Daniel to my parents' house for our church youth group's harvest party. Daniel was this sweet, awkward guy who was younger than everyone else because he'd skipped a grade or 2. He was tall, maybe 6'2", kind of heavy, probably 230 pounds, and had just recovered from knee surgery that left him limping a little. ACL tear from basketball, he told me later, though he said it in a way that made it clear he wasn't really the athletic type. But there was something about him that drew me in immediately. Maybe it was how he looked at me, like I was the most interesting person in the room, even though Sarah Mills was there in her homecoming dress from the week before, showing off for all the guys. Maybe it was how he actually listened when I talked, not just waiting for his turn to speak like most guys did. When I mentioned I was reading The Chronicles of Narnia for the 3rd time, he didn't laugh or call me a kid. He asked which book was my favorite and why, and actually cared about my answer. We became friends fast. Within a month, he was coming over 3 times a week. He'd show up after his community college classes, still wearing his backpack, and help my dad with whatever project he had going in the garage. My dad was restoring a 1967 Mustang that had been sitting under a tarp for 10 years, and Daniel would spend hours out there with him, holding flashlights and handing him tools, even though I could tell he didn't know anything about cars. I remember one dinner in particular, maybe 3 months after we met. My mom had made pot roast, and we were all sitting around the dining room table, the good china out, even though it was just Tuesday. My dad was going on about how Daniel had figured out why the Mustang's engine kept stalling, something about the fuel filter that even my dad hadn't thought of. "This young man's got a good head on his shoulders," my dad said, pointing his fork at Daniel. "Engineering school's lucky to have him." Daniel blushed, looked down at his plate. "Just lucky guess, Mr. Williams." "Nonsense," my dad continued. "You know what you're doing. Going places." My mom reached over and patted Daniel's hand. "You can build a good, quiet life with the right foundation," she said, looking directly at me when she said it. "Some people appreciate that. Stability, faithfulness, The things that matter. I felt something bristle inside me, like a cat's fur standing up. A quiet life. Was that what I was supposed to want? At 18? I pushed my green beans around my plate and said nothing. But I felt Daniel looking at me, always watching, always hoping. My parents adored him. My dad started calling him son without even realizing it. "Hand me that wrench, son." "Good to see you, son." My mom would pack extra food for him to take home, worried he wasn't eating enough at his apartment. They'd exchange these looks when Daniel wasn't watching, these hopeful, satisfied looks. I knew what they were thinking. They were already planning the wedding in their heads, could see the grandkids, could see their daughter settled with a good man who went to church and had ambition and treated their daughter like gold. The thing was, I knew Daniel had feelings for me. It was obvious in everything he did. The way he'd text me good morning every single day at exactly 7:30, right when he knew I'd be having my coffee. The way he'd drive 45 minutes across town just to bring me soup from Panera when I had a cold. The chicken noodle one with extra crackers because he remembered that's how I liked it. The way his face would light up when I walked into a room, like someone had just told him he won the lottery. Wednesday nights at youth group became increasingly complicated. I was a leader, one of the good examples for the younger kids. Pastor Mike would have me lead prayer or share my testimony about staying pure and following God's plan. I'd stand up there in my long skirt and modest blouse, my purity ring catching the fluorescent lights, and talk about the importance of waiting, of choosing God's path over the world's temptations. One night, after I'd given a particularly passionate talk about resisting peer pressure, my friend Jessica pulled me aside. "Hey, a bunch of us are going to Trevor Morrison's house after this. His parents are out of town. You should come." My stomach flipped. A real party, with real teenagers doing real things. "I can't," I said automatically. "I have to help my mom with something." "You always have to help your mom with something," Jessica said, but not meanly. "You know you're allowed to have fun, right?" "This is fun," I lied, gesturing at the church basement with its wood paneling and smell of old coffee. She shrugged and left with the others while I stayed to help stack chairs and turn off lights. Daniel beside me the whole time, both of us pretending this was enough. But I was fighting a war inside myself. Part of me loved the safety of this life, the predictability, the way everyone knew exactly who I was and what I stood for. But another part, a part that was growing louder, wanted to know what else was out there, what I was missing, who I could be if I wasn't Pastor Williams's daughter. Daniel would have been perfect for that safe life. He would have courted me properly, asked my father's permission, proposed after a respectable amount of time. He would have married me in my parents' church with the whole congregation watching, my dad officiating, my mom crying in the front row. He would have given my parents the son-in-law they dreamed about, the grandkids they prayed for, the stable, predictable, godly life they'd raised me to want. But perfect started to feel like a lock I didn't have a key for. By early 2005, the first crack in my good girl image came when I went to visit my cousin Rachel at her college in Cincinnati. She was a sophomore at UC, living in an apartment off campus with 3 other girls. It was just supposed to be a weekend trip, a chance to see what college was like since I was trying to decide if I wanted to go or just stay home and get married like half the girls from my church did. Rachel promised my parents she'd take good care of me, show me the library and the student union, and maybe take me to a campus ministry meeting. The moment I arrived at Rachel's apartment, I knew this weekend would be different. The place smelled like vanilla candles and something else, something adult and free. Her roommates were getting ready to go out, curling their hair and applying makeup in ways I'd never tried. They looked at me in my long denim skirt and cardigan and exchanged glances. "We're going to have so much fun with you," one of them said, and I didn't know if it was a promise or a threat. Rachel took me to a house party on Clifton Avenue instead of the library. The moment I walked in, every sense was overwhelmed. The bass from the music vibrated through my chest, made my bones hum. The air was thick with smoke and sweat and perfume and beer. Bodies pressed against each other in ways that would have gotten us expelled from my Christian school. Red Solo cups were everywhere, and people were laughing too loud, touching too much, being too free. For the first time in my life, I felt anonymous in the best way. No one there knew me as Pastor William's daughter, or the girl who led prayer circle at school, or the girl who'd signed a purity pledge in front of the whole congregation when she was 14. I could be anyone I wanted. I could be Amanda who danced, Amanda who drank, Amanda who didn't quote scripture, Amanda who didn't have to be perfect. I met Tyler that night. Tyler Brooks, with his business major confidence and dark hair that fell into his eyes. He appeared at my elbow with 2 red cups, handed me one without asking if I wanted it. "You look lost," he said, but in a way that made lost sound like an adventure. "I'm not lost," I said, taking the cup. "I'm exploring." He smiled like I'd said something clever. "I can help with that." When he kissed me at midnight on that fraternity house balcony, the city lights spread out below us like a promise of everything I'd been missing, I felt electric. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me against the railing, and I kissed him back like I'd been doing it my whole life instead of this being my real first kiss. The party noise faded away, and all I could hear was my heartbeat and his breathing, and a voice in my head saying, this is what you've been missing. I drove back home Sunday afternoon with my lips still swollen, my hair still smelling like his cigarettes. Everything looked different. My parents' house seemed smaller, like it was shrinking around me. When my mom asked about my weekend, I lied so easily it scared me. "The campus is beautiful," I said. "Rachel introduced me to some girls from her Bible study." "That's wonderful, honey," she said, touching my cheek. "I'm proud of you for staying true to yourself, even away from home." The guilt should have eaten me alive. Instead, it made me angry. Why should I feel guilty for one kiss, for one night of feeling alive? When Daniel asked me to hang out that week, I said yes, but something had shifted. We went to Applebee's, and while he talked about his classes and his job at Radio Shack, all I could think about was Tyler's hands in my hair, Tyler's mouth on mine, the way Tyler took what he wanted without asking permission. The moment everything changed between us was when Daniel finally asked me to be his girlfriend. We were sitting in his car outside my house on a Thursday night in early March. He'd been building up the courage all evening. I could tell by the way he kept starting sentences and stopping, the way his hands drummed on the steering wheel. The turn signal was still clicking from when he'd pulled up to the curb, this rhythmic tick, tick, tick that seemed to count down to something inevitable. The porch light was on, casting shadows across his face. My parents always left it on when I was out, like a beacon calling me home to safety. "Amanda," he finally said, turning to face me fully, "I need to tell you something." I knew what was coming, had known for months. "Daniel?" "Just let me say this," he said, taking a deep breath that seemed to pull all the air from the car. "I don't want a season with you. I want a life. I want all the boring Tuesday nights and early Saturday mornings and everything in between. I want to wake up next to you when we're old and gray and still think you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." The words hung there between us, heavy and real and everything I should have wanted to hear. My heart was pounding, but not in the way it should have been, not the way it did when Tyler kissed me. I could hear that long breath he took, could see the hope in his eyes, could feel the weight of what saying yes would mean. A ring, a wedding, a house down the street from my parents, Bible studies and potlucks and missionary funds, a quiet, good, predictable life. "Then you deserve someone better," I said, pretending I wasn't shaking, pretending I wasn't destroying something precious. "Someone who can give you that life." His face crumbled and then rebuilt itself into something polite and distant. "I understand," he said, but I could see in his eyes that I'd broken something in him that would never quite heal right. I should have let him go then, should have let him heal and move on. Instead, I was selfish. I kept texting him, kept asking him to hang out, kept him in my orbit while I started exploring this new version of myself. That spring, I became an expert at living a double life. I started curating a new persona online and disappearing to Cincinnati most weekends. I told my parents I was looking at colleges, thinking about transferring. They believed me because I'd never lied to them before, not about anything important. The first time I slept with Tyler was in his apartment, on a mattress on the floor with Bob Marley watching from a poster on the wall. I told myself I was in love, that this meant something. But Tyler barely texted me afterward, maybe once a week if I was lucky, usually late at night, usually asking if I was coming to town. But instead of pulling back, I pushed forward harder. If Tyler didn't want me, I'd find someone who did. There were so many parties, so many guys who looked at me like I was something new and exciting. The pastor's daughter gone wild. I was a novelty, a challenge, a story they could tell their friends. There was one reckless night with Tyler's 2 roommates that I still can't think about without wanting to disappear. Too much vodka, too much wanting to feel wanted, too much of everything I'd been denied and was suddenly gorging myself on. The next morning, driving home on I-71 with my head pounding and my whole body feeling like it belonged to someone else, I had to pull over twice to throw up. Not from the alcohol, but from the realization of what I'd become in just a few short months. Meanwhile, Daniel was transforming himself. I'd see him around town sometimes, and each time he looked different. The weight was melting off. His clothes fit better. He stood taller. Girls were starting to notice him, and he was starting to notice them back. But in my mind, he was still mine. He'd wait. He had to wait. I remember the night that delusion shattered. I was at a bar called the Red Door in Columbus with some girls from high school, drunk on vodka and the attention from random guys. The music was loud, some rock song everyone knew the words to, and the air was thick with possibility. My friend Katie grabbed my arm. "Oh my God, is that Daniel?" I turned to see him across the room, but this wasn't the Daniel I knew. He was lean, muscular, wearing dark jeans and a fitted shirt that showed he'd been working out. He was with a group of guys from Ohio State, and women kept approaching their table, drawn like moths to this new flame he'd become. One blonde girl, couldn't have been older than 21, was practically sitting in his lap. The old Daniel would have been flustered, awkward. This Daniel had his hand on her lower back, completely at ease. When she whispered something in his ear, he threw his head back and laughed, this confident sexual sound I'd never heard from him before. "You should go say hi," Katie said, not knowing our history, not knowing what she was suggesting. The vodka made me brave. Or stupid, probably both. I walked over, my heels unsteady on the sticky floor, and put my hand on his shoulder. "Daniel!" I called out over the music. He turned, and for a second I saw recognition flicker in his eyes before they went cold. Just completely cold, like looking at winter. "Amanda," he said. Not a question, not excitement, just an acknowledgement that I existed. The blonde looked me up and down, sizing up the competition. "Who's this?" "Just someone I used to know," he said, already turning back to her. "From high school." The words hit me like ice water. Just someone he used to know. Not his best friend, not the girl he loved, not the girl he wanted a life with. Just someone from high school, as insignificant as a yearbook signature. I stood there for another moment, my hand still on his shoulder. The music changed to something slower, sadder. He shrugged my hand off, the movement so casual, so dismissive, that I actually stumbled backward in my heels. "I should go," I managed to say, though I doubt he heard me over the music. "Probably best," he agreed, not even looking at me, his attention fully on the blonde who was now playing with his collar. I went to the bathroom and cried for 20 minutes, mascara running down my cheeks in black rivers while my friends held my hair back and assumed I was just drunk. But I was mourning something bigger than they could understand. The safety net I thought would always be there. The backup plan I didn't even know I was counting on until it was gone. I kept trying to maintain our friendship after that, but he was pulling away with determination. He'd take days to respond to my texts, and when he did, it was 1 or 2 words. He stopped coming to group hangouts if he knew I'd be there. When we did talk, he was polite but distant, like we were acquaintances who happened to share some history. 2 years later, I stopped by his work to surprise him, like I used to do when we were close. He was working at Best Buy now, in the computer section, closing up for the night. The store was mostly empty, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of a vacuum in another department. At first, it felt like old times. We were laughing about something stupid Chris had done, and for a moment I forgot everything that had changed between us. Then I asked what he was doing that weekend, and he told me he had a date. The words hit me like a physical blow. I tried to play it cool, but I needed to know everything. Who was she? Where did she come from? What did she look like? With each answer, delivered in that same casual tone while he counted down his register, I felt something inside me twist tighter. Her name was Becky. She was new to town from Michigan. They'd been talking for a month. She was pretty, she was smart, she was everything I should have been. I went home that night and stalked her MySpace for hours. She was beautiful in an understated way, the kind of girl who didn't need to try too hard. Her pictures showed her at museums, coffee shops, bookstores. She looked sophisticated, put together, like she'd never had a rebellious phase because she'd never needed one. She looked like the kind of girl who would appreciate a quiet life. I tried everything to get him back into my life. I started hanging out with Chris more, knowing Daniel would eventually show up. I'd text him about emergencies that weren't emergencies. My car making a weird noise, needing help with my computer, my dad asking about him. But he saw through all of it. The last real conversation we had was when I confronted him about abandoning our friendship. It was at that same Best Buy, a month after he'd told me about Becky. The store was closed, just him and a manager doing inventory. The receipt printer kept making these little buzzing sounds, and the security system beeped every few minutes. I'd waited outside until the manager left, then knocked on the glass door until Daniel let me in. "It's normal to have friends of the opposite gender," I said, following him as he turned off displays. "Becky should trust you. You're not that kind of guy." He stopped walking, turned to face me fully under those harsh fluorescent lights. I could see every detail of his face, how much it had changed, how much he had changed. "I don't split loyalty," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Becky gets my firsts now. Time, attention, energy." Each word landed like a small cut. He delivered them without anger, without bitterness, just simple facts. The receipt printer buzzed again, printing out the day's final reports. "That's not fair," I said, hearing how desperate I sounded. "It's completely fair," he replied, turning back to his closing duties. "You taught me what I don't want, Amanda. I should thank you for that." That was it. He was done with me. I watched from the sidelines as their relationship grew. They became exclusive, then engaged, then married. I kept waiting for it to fall apart, for him to realize that Becky was wrong for him. But it never happened. My 20s were a string of bad decisions, but none worse than Jake. I was 30, desperate to prove I wasn't damaged goods. He pursued me hard, said all the right things, made me feel like maybe I could still have a normal life. We dated for 8 months before I found out he had a bet with his friends about whether he could get me to do certain things in bed. $500. That's what I was worth. When I confronted him, he shrugged and said, "You should be flattered. You're kind of a legend around here." A legend, just not the kind anyone wants to be. That solidified the town's opinion of me for good. There were others before Jake. Evan, who shared intimate details with his friends, showing them pictures I'd sent in confidence. Logan J., who was seeing his ex-wife the entire time we dated. But Jake and that bet, that's what finally broke me. That's when I realized what I'd become in everyone's eyes. Not Amanda the person, but Amanda the cautionary tale. I tried to clean up my image in my late 20s, started going back to church, deleted all my old MySpace photos. But it was too late. The damage was done. In our part of Columbus, everyone knows everyone's business, and my business had become public property. My 30s have been lonelier than I ever imagined. I watch my friends get married, have kids, build lives with men who look at them the way Daniel used to look at me. Sarah, my best friend from high school, stopped inviting me to things after her husband said he wasn't comfortable with me around. Church moms politely sidestep my offers to help with youth group. Just last month, Mrs. Patterson smiled that practiced smile and said, "Oh, honey, we've got plenty of helpers already, but bless your heart for offering." The subtext was clear. We don't want you near our teenage daughters. Sometimes I get angry at the double standard. Why am I a legend in a bad way while Jake and his friends get to move on with their lives, marry nice girls, become deacons at church? But then I remember, I made the choices. I gave them the ammunition. Every choice was mine. The most painful encounter happened at my nephew's birthday party 3 months ago. My sister had invited what felt like the entire town to the park pavilion. Daniel and Becky were there with their kids. He was pushing the twins on the swings, making airplane noises, being the kind of dad every kid deserves. When one of them scraped his knee, Daniel scooped him up without hesitation, kissed the wound, made it better with just his presence. "Why do dads have magic healing powers?" his daughter asked Becky. "Because they love you more than anything," Becky said, then caught Daniel's eye and smiled. It was such a small moment, such a nothing moment, but it destroyed me, because it was real. They were real. This wasn't some perfect Facebook fantasy. When Becky snapped at one of the twins for throwing cake, then immediately apologized, kissed his head, explained she was tired, it made everything worse. She wasn't perfect. She was human, flawed, real, and that made her better than perfect. It made her someone Daniel could actually build a life with. Not a fantasy, but a partner. My mom was watching them too. She turned to me and said quietly, "That could have been you." Later, I overheard 2 women talking by the punch bowl, not knowing I was behind them. "Is that Amanda? The one who rejected Daniel all those years ago?" "That's her. Can you believe she thought she could do better? I heard she went completely wild in college." "Finding religion doesn't erase the past, though, does it?" They laughed, and I stood there holding my nephew's juice box, unable to move, unable to breathe. Because they were right. Last year, I saw Tyler at a work conference in Cincinnati. Tyler Brooks, the one who started it all. I'd practiced what I would say if I ever saw him again, something clever and cutting, something that would make him remember me, maybe even regret how he'd treated me. I'd rehearsed it in my head 1,000 times. But when I saw him in that hotel lobby, all the words died on my lips. He walked right past me at first. When I finally said his name, he squinted at me for a long moment. "Oh yeah, Amy, right?" he said. "From that one weekend?" Amy, not even my name. I was just another girl in a long line of girls, not even worth remembering correctly. The speech I'd prepared crumbled into nothing. I mumbled something about having the wrong person and escaped to the bathroom, where I sat in a stall and tried to remember how to breathe. The cruelest irony of all, Daniel became everything I thought I wanted in those other guys. Confident, successful, attractive, the kind of man who could walk into a room and own it. But by the time he became that man, he was already Becky's. I didn't just lose the sweet, awkward boy who loved me. I lost the amazing man he became, the father he is, the husband I dream about in my empty apartment. Sometimes, late at night at the marketing firm where I work, the motion sensor lights flick on one by one as I walk to the break room. I microwave my sad desk dinner, scroll through Google Maps on my phone, find myself looking at Daniel's street. His house is right there, a little blue dot on the screen. I could call. His number's probably the same. But I never do. I just sit there in the empty office, eating reheated pasta, looking at a life that could have been mine. I saw Daniel's mom at the farmer's market last month. She was picking through tomatoes, and when she saw me, her face did this quick thing where she started to smile, then remembered who I was, then settled on something polite but distant. "Amanda," she said, not asking how I was, not really wanting to know. "Mrs. Peterson, the tomatoes look good this year." "They do." She picked up 2 more, put them in her bag. "Daniel's Becky makes the most wonderful sauce with these. The kids can't get enough of it." The gentle pity in her voice was worse than anger would have been. She patted my arm once, lightly, like you'd touch something fragile you didn't want to break, and moved on to the corn stand. Every Sunday I drive past his street on the way to church. It's not the fastest route, but I take it anyway. Their house is the white one with the green shutters, the one with the basketball hoop in the driveway and chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Last week there was a hopscotch pattern fading in the rain. The numbers barely visible but still there, evidence of a life being lived. I wear the little gold cross and play the part. On Sundays I pass the casserole. On Mondays I pass his street. The porch light is always on. It was once, for me.